Hey, this is wertwert and I make stuff that no one needs. Previously on DougDoug.
Okay. I'm assuming I should be at the front of this. Or, no, that is the front. What do I do? Oh, there's signs. I should probably just read these. Welcome to Make Peggle by CS wertwert. Place an armor stand player on the pressure plate at top. Hit the reset button to hit random pegs. Stand on the stone plate to drop the ball. It worked. The server's still lagging. Got it. Okay, well, I can come back to your CS.
Hello everyone, CSWort here, and sadly DougDoug was not able to play McPeggle before the plots world was deleted. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate it myself. For starters, when hitting the reset button here, a random number of pegs and no particular order should have been pushed out, like so. This was to create a unique and interesting game for each playthrough. The player would then place an armor stand up top here to act as the ball, they would then travel back and forth across the ice. And whenever the player is ready, they can step on one of these pressure plates to retract the ice to drop the ball in hopes of hitting a peg. Now, an actual player could also stand up there in place of the armor stand, but that was a lot less consistent. Anyway, let's see if I can go ahead and get this to land on some of them. Oh, there we go. And we see that when it hit those pegs, it bounced. Now, sometimes it doesn't bounce for some reason on the single player world here. But anyway, it's going to slowly make its way back up to the top using a flying machine right there. And so, in the meantime, I'm going to activate the sidewalls here. Because in the actual game of Peggle, whenever the ball hits either a peg or the wall, it's supposed to jump all over the place. So let's see if I can knock out some more of these pegs or even just hit the wall first. Let's try and hit the other wall. Oh, there we go. Bounces all over the place, gotta love it. And so it's going to make its way back up to the top. And as it's doing that, I'll mention that this is in fact version 3 of the game. That's because version 1 and 2 were on a older world of the plots. That was before we updated to version 1.12. We were on 1.8. And yeah, once we updated, my entire plot got reset. And so I had to end up redoing everything from scratch. But I had access to observers, so things I decided to change up. Okay, and let's see if I can get that middle one. Perfect. And so in the old version, rather than having an elevator, I used a piston elevator. And that was a lot quicker. And I had a life score count over there. And sadly, because we were only in 1.12, I could not use a bubble column elevator. So yeah, basically just left with a flying machine, which is rather slow, and you have to wait for it to even return. Anyway, let's see if I can knock out the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4 pegs there. This is always a little more difficult when there's only a couple left. Right there. Ooh, didn't get hit by the wall, but I got that one. So I'll go ahead and just cut to the points where I am hitting this back. Alright, big money, come on. Oh. Okay, let's try this again. I'll aim for one of those ones. Okay, not bad, got one. Okay, let's try and hit the one in the corner there again. Yes! Oh, that was close. I was hoping it would bounce off the wall and hit that last one, but just did not have enough oomph. So close. Okay, here we go. And I did the exact same thing. Well, unlike DougDoug, I do not have lives to sacrifice to Peggle, so with that, I must admit defeat by 1 block. So yeah, I'll go ahead and start explaining some of this. Alright, I'll start off by explaining why I chose the armor stand to be the ball for the game. Now, for starters, we have to use an entity because, unlike blocks that stay stationary throughout the world, entities can freely move about it, such as the player. Now, we can immediately eliminate half the entities from the list. For instance, dropped items on the ground have such a small hitbox that for them to hit the peg would be pretty hard, and you also have to get them lined up perfectly. Then there's the matter of falling sand, gravel, and anvils, and while those could be used to give a sideways velocity on them while they're falling, it's really hard to get them to fall down straight as soon as the player steps on a pressure plate or hits a button. So they could have been used. However, the real issue I came into with them was when they land on the ground and end up back in block form, it's really hard to keep them moving around. Then we have things like mobs, such as the villager here. And the issue I had with them was I was in Plots World and did not have permission to spawn in mobs. So you could say that their pathfinding would be fun and add a bunch of randomness, but their pathfinding does not always work, and they'll stand in the same spot for minutes on end. So, I mean, it's a good thing that I didn't even use them. That kind of leaves us with the minecarts, boats, and the armor stand. Now, sadly, minecarts, as soon as they're off rails, pretty much lose all momentum immediately. And that leaves us with the boats and armor stands, and it's a bit of a trade-off between the two. So with armor stands, when they're bouncing on slime blocks, they have a very nice fluid bounce. Now the boat has this weird floaty animation, and it takes forever for it to actually land back on the slime block here. This is reported in the bug tracker, and something that I added to it was if you actually drop the slime block quick enough, the boat will, upon its second bounce, break. Why this is the case, I don't know. Now, the trade-off here is that while the armor stand can only go a few blocks on the ice, the boat would have been able to slide very, very far. Now, to compensate for this, I just made an extension to push the armor stand one more time to give us a little bit of extra space on the ice here. So yeah, armor stand it is. Okay, so moving on to the pegs. Now, these had gone through several different iterations, but my first one looks something like this, where it would have a sticky piston that is being bud powered, and anytime an entity would pass through the string here, it would simply push this forward, and then the block of redstone up here would power this line to dust to keep the piston extended, preventing it from resetting. And the lamp is used as an indicator because the only way you could tell was if this block of redstone was pushed back, which is not that obvious if you have a whole wall. And so the main issue I had with this, and what prompted me to immediately fix it, was the only way to reset it was if I broke this dust and replaced it manually. So my second iteration of this, I used another piston on the bottom here to zero tick the sticky piston here and have it push forward. This would prevent it from needing a reset mechanism, and it made it one wide. But while I was rebuilding this, also the reset here, you just have to power this and have it hold out long enough for that piston to extend. While rebuilding this, I realized I could have just simply, instead of having a sticky piston here, made this a regular piston, and it would work all the same. So if I go ahead and hit this now, we see that works perfectly fine without even needing yet another piston down here. So this was all great, except for the fact that the server then reset and I lost my plot, and I had to rebuild it, but I then had access to observers. Now, the benefit of using an observer is the fact that it leaves a slight delay before powering the piston. That gives entities enough time to actually bounce on the slime underneath. Because over here I set up a actually simpler design than I had right there. By simply using a single block of redstone, I could actually bud update this piston as well for the reset. If an entity falls, it will not have enough time to hit that slime before it needs to bounce. So, if I go ahead and demonstrate here, it moves out of the way too quickly. Now, the observer does give it a slight bit of delay that would allow this to bounce. However, I don't think I've been getting it to bounce in my single player world, for some reason. But, very simple, the piston just gets powered and pushes this L shape of slime blocks over to the reset piston. And then whenever it's ready, you just power that again, and it's reset. Now, this is what I used for the final design, so if we hop back over to the Plots world, and so if we look at the back of the machine here, we can actually see just a bunch of these modules, one right after another, stacked layer by layer, and of course they're spaced out for the slime blocks not to interfere with each other, but I put them in this pattern to both look intimidating, but also create a bit of a challenge for any player who wants to extend all of the pegs, because all of the vertical spaces will be covered by at least one peg, or slime block in this case. Alright, and looking on the back here, each of the modules is hooked up to an item randomizer to randomly determine if when the player hits the reset button, the peg gets extended or not. And this is just simply done by having the observer power this dropper here to either push the redstone dust or the wooden shovel to the hopper up above. The comparator will read the signal strength. If we get either the dust that is stackable, we get signal strength 1, nothing happens. And if we get the shovel, we get signal strength 2 because it's non-stackable. And that will then have the observer power the piston to push the slime blocks forward, activating the peg. Now, I could not just use the redstone dust directly into the piston, and I had to use the observer because the server was being stupid and just was not working that way. Anyway, on the back here, I am powering all of these observers using a powered rail to try and reduce lag as much as possible. I hooked that up to a falling edge instant wire line, so when the player hits the reset button, they have time to move forward and look at all of the pegs being pushed forward. Now on the front side, when the player steps on the pressure plate, the redstone dust will activate to depower the torch, and there's an instant wire line to move the ice backwards, so the player does not have to compensate any sort of delay to try and make the armor stand drop. And sadly, I did have to alternate between having the slime blocks on the backside and the bottom side of the ice, because we would otherwise supersede the pull limit of the sticky piston. But on the plus side up here, I did create a rather ingenious device for the extension here, using only a single slime block and 2 sticky pistons. When the armor stand steps on the pressure plate, there's some bit of delay, and then the observer will send a pulse to, again, mostly just power this piston. But we then have this observer quasi-power this piston using this block, and it just perfectly works out. I did have to use some obsidian blocks right here because for some reason they were generating ghost blocks. And if we see this in action, it's just a rather neat design. And of course the player can ride this themselves, like so. I did ride it myself several times as I was coming up with what to do next. And other than that, on the front side here, I did use some glazed terracotta, not only for design, but also because they do not stick when the slime blocks for the walls here are moving back and forth. Just a simple observer clock, like so. And then on the next to the pegs, I did use no blocks because we were in 1.12 and I could. But for some reason, although I updated to 1.16, they're not moving with the slime blocks, which is rather interesting, I should say. But other than that, once the armor stand falls down, it will land in the water stream, make its way over, get slime launched over into the flying machine. And because we were in 1.12, I had to use the flying machine. 1.13, you could use a bubble elevator. But even higher versions, you could just automatically use a dispenser to redispense the armor stand. That would work even better, and you wouldn't even have to have this weird convoluted setup. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have for today. I will have a link in the description that will have a download for this if anyone wants to play. And that's all. So goodbye.